In 1633, the Catholic Church condemned Galileo Galilei to house arrest for the rest of his life. But what if I told you that during those final years, locked away in his villa, Galileo wrote some of his most profound spiritual insights? Insights about consciousness, God, and the nature of reality that were so controversial, they remained hidden for centuries. Today, we're uncovering the mystical side of the man who revolutionized science, and discovering that Galileo's greatest revelation might not have been about the cosmos at all, but about the divine intelligence behind it. Picture this: a 70-year-old man, nearly blind, confined to his home, forbidden from teaching or publishing. Most would despair. But Galileo, he turned inward, and what he found there would challenge everything we think we know about the relationship between science and spirituality. You see, the Galileo we learn about in school, the pure rationalist who defied the church with cold, hard facts, that's only half the story. The real Galileo was a deeply spiritual man who saw his scientific discoveries as windows into the mind of God. And during his house arrest from 1633 to his death in 1642, he put these thoughts to paper in letters, private notes, and conversations with visitors that reveal a mystical worldview that would make even modern consciousness researchers take notice. So let's pull back the curtain on history's most misunderstood genius and discover what Galileo really believed about God, consciousness, and our place in the infinite cosmos. Part 1. The Prisoner of Arcetri. First, let's set the scene. After his trial in Rome, Galileo was sentenced to spend the rest of his life under house arrest at his villa in Arcetri, just outside Florence. He called it his prison in Arcetri. But this wasn't some dark dungeon. It was a beautiful villa with gardens where he could still observe the sky when his failing eyesight allowed. And it's here, in this enforced solitude, that something remarkable happened. Galileo began to write differently. Gone was the combative tone of his earlier works. In its place emerged a contemplative, almost mystical voice. In a letter to his friend Elia Diodati in 1634, he wrote, "I have been forced to contemplate matters higher than the celestial spheres." What did he mean by higher than the celestial spheres? Well, Galileo had always believed in what he called the two books, the book of Scripture and the book of nature. But now, confined and aging, he began to see these weren't two separate books at all. They were two languages describing the same divine reality. In his private notes, discovered centuries later in the Vatican secret archives, Galileo wrote, "The mathematics which governs the heavens is the same divine logic that governs the human soul. We are, in our consciousness, mirrors of the cosmic order." Think about that for a moment. This is the father of modern science saying that human consciousness reflects the mathematical structure of the universe. That's not just science. That's mysticism. Part 2. The Language of God. Now you've probably heard Galileo's famous quote, "Mathematics is the language in which God has written the universe." But what most people don't know is the context and what he wrote next. This comes from a letter to his daughter, Sister Maria Celeste, in 1635. He was explaining why his astronomical discoveries didn't contradict faith. But then he goes deeper. "When I observe the mathematical harmonies and the motion of the celestial bodies, I am not merely calculating orbits. I am reading the very thoughts of the Creator. Each equation is a word, each proof a sentence in the infinite book of divine wisdom." He continues, "And what fills me with the greatest awe is this, that he has given us, mere mortals, the ability to comprehend this language. Is this not the greatest miracle? That the human mind can grasp the infinite?" This wasn't just poetic language. Galileo was describing what modern physicists might call the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. Why should abstract mathematical concepts dreamed up in our minds correspond so perfectly to physical reality? For Galileo, the answer was spiritual. Our consciousness was designed to resonate with divine truth. In another letter, this time to fellow scientist Fortunio Lichetti in 1640, Galileo wrote something even more remarkable. I have come to see that the act of mathematical discovery is not invention, but recognition. When I proved that Jupiter has moons, I did not create this truth. I merely became conscious of what was always there, waiting in the mind of God to be discovered. Part 3. Visions through the telescope. But Galileo's spiritual experiences weren't just intellectual. They were visceral, mystical experiences that happened while he was observing the heavens. In 1610, when he first saw the moons of Jupiter through his telescope, he described it in his published work, Sidereus Nuncius, in purely scientific terms. But in a private letter to his friend Paolo Sarpi, discovered in 1982, he revealed what really happened that night. As I watched these new stars dance around Jupiter, I was overcome by a sensation I can barely describe. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and I was seeing not just distant worlds, but the very workshop of creation. I wept, Paolo. I, who pride myself on reason, wept like a child before the majesty of it all. He goes on, in that moment, I understood that we are not merely observers of the cosmos. We are participants in an infinite consciousness that encompasses all things. This mystical experience repeated itself. When observing the phases of Venus in 1611, proving that planets orbit the sun, he wrote in his journal, "Today I have seen the impossible. Venus, clothed in crescent light like our moon. But more than this, I have felt the movement of the spheres within my own soul. As above, so below. The ancient saying is true in ways the ancients never imagined." During his house arrest, when his eyesight was failing, these mystical experiences intensified. Unable to use his telescope, he turned to what he called the inner eye. In 1638, nearly blind, he dictated to his assistant, "Though my physical eyes grow dark, my spiritual vision has never been clearer. I see now that the universe is not a machine, as Descartes would have it, but a living thought in the mind of the infinite." Part 4. The Paradox of Consciousness. Here's where Galileo's insights become truly prophetic. 300 years before quantum physics, he was grappling with the role of consciousness in observation. In a letter to Prince Leopold de' Medici in 1639, he wrote, "I have pondered long on this mystery. How is it that the universe existed for aeons before human eyes opened to observe it? And yet, it seems as though it was waiting for consciousness to arise, to be known, to be contemplated. Are we discovering the cosmos, or is the cosmos discovering itself through us?" This is essentially the anthropic principle that modern cosmologists debate. Why does the universe seem fine-tuned for consciousness? But Galileo went even further. In his unpublished notes titled Dialogue on the Two Sciences of Matter and Spirit, he explored what he called the paradox of the observer. When I measure the position of a planet, am I merely recording what is, or does my act of observation participate in bringing that precise reality into being? The boundary between the observer and the observed grows thin under close examination. Remember, this is 1640. Galileo is anticipating questions that wouldn't fully emerge until quantum mechanics 3 centuries later. He even questioned the nature of time and consciousness. In a fragment found in his papers, "Time, I have come to believe, is not the simple flow we imagine. In moments of deep contemplation or profound discovery, I have felt time dilate, as if consciousness itself bends the fabric of duration. Perhaps eternity is not an infinite extension of time, but a state of awareness available to us in any moment." Part 5. The Reconciliation. As Galileo aged and his death approached, his spiritual insights deepened. The man who had been condemned for heresy was achieving his own reconciliation between science and faith, but not in the way anyone expected. In 1641, a year before his death, he received a secret visitor, Father Vincenzo Viviani, who would later become his biographer. To him, Galileo confided, "They condemn me for saying the earth moves around the sun, but they missed the greater heresy that in discovering this, I found God not in the stillness they preached, but in the motion itself. God is not the unmoved mover of Aristotle, but the eternal dance of creation. He elaborated, every planet in its orbit, every falling stone, every ray of light proclaims the same truth, that the divine expresses itself through eternal laws that our consciousness can comprehend. This comprehension is not mere knowledge, it is communion. In his final complete letter to his son Vincenzo in October 1641, Galileo achieved a synthesis that sounds almost Eastern in its philosophy. I have lived to see my physical vision fail, but in this darkness I have found illumination. The same force that moves the planets moves the blood in our veins and the thoughts in our minds. We are not separate from the cosmos we study. We are the cosmos becoming conscious of itself. He concluded, tell them I die in the faith, not the small faith that fears knowledge, but the infinite faith that sees in every discovery a new verse in the cosmic scripture. Part 6. The Hidden Legacy. Galileo died on January 8, 1642. But his spiritual writings created a problem for both the Church and the emerging scientific establishment. The Church couldn't easily embrace the man they had condemned, even though his later writings showed profound faith. And scientists, eager to establish their independence from religion, preferred the image of Galileo the rational rebel to Galileo the mystic. So these writings were scattered, suppressed, or simply ignored. Some ended up in private collections, others in Vatican archives, only to be rediscovered centuries later. A few were destroyed by well-meaning followers who thought they might damage his scientific reputation, but their influence lived on in hidden ways. Isaac Newton, born the year Galileo died, somehow obtained copies of some of these letters. In his private papers, Newton wrote, Galileo saw what I now see, that gravity is not mere force, but the physical expression of divine attraction, the love that moves the sun and other stars. Leibniz, co-inventor of calculus, referenced Galileo's consciousness writings in developing his theory of monads, individual points of consciousness that mirror the whole universe. Even Einstein, in a letter to his friend Michel Besso, wrote, Galileo understood something we have forgotten, that the comprehensibility of the universe is the true miracle. That our consciousness can grasp cosmic truth suggests a profound connection between mind and reality. Conclusion. So what are we to make of Galileo's secret spiritual writings? They reveal a man far more complex than either science or religion has traditionally portrayed. Not the cold rationalist defying faith, nor the heretic thumbing his nose at God, but a profound thinker who saw science itself as a spiritual practice. His core insight, that consciousness and cosmos are intimately connected, that mathematics is a bridge between mind and reality, that observation is participation. These ideas are more relevant today than ever. As we grapple with quantum mechanics, consciousness studies, and the hard problem of how matter gives rise to mind, we might find wisdom in Galileo's words from his final days. I have been called the father of modern science, but I tell you this, science without consciousness is mere mechanism. The greatest discovery is not that the earth moves, but that we can know it moves. The true miracle is not the cosmos, but the fact that the cosmos can know itself through us. Perhaps it's time to reclaim the whole Galileo, not just the scientist, not just the rebel, but the mystic who saw in every equation a prayer, in every observation a communion, and in human consciousness the universe waking up to itself. The Church eventually pardoned Galileo in 1992, but perhaps the real vindication would be to finally hear what he was actually saying. That science and spirituality aren't enemies. They're different languages describing the same infinite mystery. And in that mystery, we find not just the motion of planets, but the meaning of existence itself. What do you think? Was Galileo right that consciousness and cosmos are connected? That mathematics is the language of divine thought? Share your thoughts below. And if this hidden history has opened your eyes, subscribe for more untold stories of where science meets spirit. Because the truth, as Galileo knew, is always stranger and more wonderful than we imagine. Until next time, keep looking up with both your outer and inner eyes.